Morning, everyone. So I'm being Graham again today, but my hat's downstairs. I thought I would talk about the William Wragg thing again, mostly because actually I wanted to talk about some of the implications for Rishi Sunak's leadership. Because I'll tell you what's odd. So we discussed this last week. I am actually just going to mention a couple of things. Actually, before I get on to what I mainly want to talk about, there was a comment here. I've lost it now. Suggesting he should be in prison. I'm not as harsh as that. There are some people who have expressed sympathy for William Wragg as being a victim. And I don't just mean from people who have an interest in backing him because of tribal politics. I mean people who are anti-Tory have expressed sympathy for him. And, you know, what I would say to that is there was a point where he was a victim. You know, he was being blackmailed. He won't call it blackmail, but he was being blackmailed. And in a situation like that, people can panic. Yes, the way he dealt with it was poor, but people can panic. But we're not talking about a situation where he did something in his youth and it was a bit unwise, but it was legal. But now as an MP, all of a sudden it's really embarrassing, and they were, no. He provided the compromising information himself. Ergo, pictures of his willy. So, so I don't see him as a victim because he didn't take his job as an MP seriously. However, I also don't see it as serious as he should go to jail. Unless, of course, he's also done something we don't know about yet. But in terms of because that's possible. Remember, this has been going on for a very long time. There's obviously been cover-ups. It's all right saying William Wragg has apologised now. He only apologised when it became public. The police are conducting investigations. Obviously, from that point of view, it's an investigation into the criminals rather than the MPs. But inevitably, it's going to look at what MPs have done. Some MPs reported it straight away. Some, like, Mr. Wragg, did not. But, yeah, I'm not as harsh as saying he should go to prison. Sorry, it's telling me the bit rate is weird again. I don't know why it does this on this stream and not on my own. It says they're stupid and then they're stupid. Yeah, I mean, well, he didn't. This is the problem, you see. Like, as a teacher, for example, there are certain things. Like, what Wragg did wasn't illegal, as far as I know. He hasn't done anything illegal. Or at least in terms of what, initially led up to the blackmail. Is just sent a dick pic, which, as long as you're sending it to someone who wants it, it's not illegal, is it, right? But there are certain things, like as a teacher, a teacher wouldn't do that. A teacher could get sacked for that. He hasn't been sacked, but there are certain professions where you accept privations. There are things that citizens can legally do, but you can't. So there's certain things you can't do as a teacher. There's certain things you can't do as a police officer. Some civil servants, working in Whitehall particularly, but there's a certain level of civil servant that's not even allowed to be openly political. So you're not even allowed to, be a member of a political party. So there are certain professions, in order to maintain the integrity of that profession, that you have to accept that there are some liberties that are available to your fellow citizens that are not available to you. So, but MPs, like William Wragg, obviously did not see that applied to them. And the thing is, as an MP, it's not even just about maintaining the integrity of the profession, whatever's left of it. As an MP, you are going to be targeted. You're going to be targeted by criminals. You are going to be targeted by potentially foreign agents. William Wragg, when he gave those phone numbers over, for all he knew, because it's quite clear at this point now he's been blackmailed. It could have been a foreign agent, could have been a Russian agent. How does he know? Yeah, how does he know? But anyway, what the real issue with the way it's panned out now, because I discussed all that I think last week. What is different here for me is, so he's now resigned from all the positions he should have resigned from. He's resigned from his roles on the select committee, which is costing him 18 grand a year. Although he wouldn't have a year left to go anyway, I suppose not. But, that's his salary gone down. But that was important for the public. I don't think he should have been a chair of a select committee where he gets access to confidential papers that even most other MPs don't get, if he's known to be compromised. He also resigned as vice chair of the 1922 committee, which is more of an internal Conservative Party matter, but still, you know, it's probably best he's not in a position to be dealing with confidential information about his fellow MPs. And then he's resigned the whip voluntarily, which is weird. Because that now, in fact, do you know what? I don't know whether anyone saw this, but Rishi Sunak has now given Labour another attack line. You know, one of Labour's most successful attack lines against Rishi Sunak is that he's weak. He's a weak leader. Well, guess what? Do you know what? I'm not going to put a bet on this. There's probably no way to put a bet on it. But I'm going to guess I know what one of Keir Starmer's lines in PMQs is going to be next week, because they've basically already tried it out. On the news that William Wragg was voluntarily surrendering the party whip, do you know what Labour said? They said Rishi Sunak is so weak that William Wragg has had to fire himself. And that is exactly what it looks like. You know, Richard Holden, who's the Conservative Party chair, so he speaks for the leadership, he's appointed by Sunak personally. So he has said that it was right for Wragg to surrender the whip. So it's like, hang on a minute. First of all, the Tory party leadership completely defended William Wragg last week. When this news broke, they defended him as a victim. There was no emphasis placed on his compromising security of other MPs and therefore the security of Parliament and the government and, you know, basically national security. The emphasis was on him as the victim. They totally backed him to the hilt. So now if the leadership are saying it's right that he doesn't have the party whip, why didn't they withdraw it from him? Because now we have to ask us, because this creates a question, why has William Wragg voluntarily surrendered the whip? It's one of three reasons, isn't it? One, he himself has realised that, because it's no, I mean, someone mentioned there, you know, earlier on in the comments that, oh, it's brilliant for him because now he gets paid as an MP, but he doesn't have to follow the party whip. Well, he's rebelled against the party whip quite a few times in his, you know, as an MP. So he's obviously doesn't mind rebelling against the party whip when he wants to. He has a history, basically. He's not a good little boy who always does what the leader tells him to. So that won't be the reason. If he's made the decision himself, totally independent of anyone else, it'll be because he's looked at it and thinking, you know, he could be quite loyal to the party. He's never been loyal to the leaders of the party, but, you know, he could be loyal to the party and he could be thinking, look, he's already said he was going to step down anyway. This was a long time ago. Might be related to this because this has been going on a long time. We just didn't know. But he was never standing at the next election anyway. So he could have just decided, look, you know, I'll do my party a favour. This is a bad look. I'll just withdraw the whip myself. But that makes Sunak look bad because it's like, so what he's basically saying is Sunak's too stupid or too weak to withdraw the whip from me, so I'll do it myself for the sake of the party. Ian to £5 super chat. Thank you. Says we should have found out about this when he resigned as an MP. He hasn't resigned as an MP. You mean when he is offering when he was going to step down for the next election? Well, in terms of when we should have found out about it, arguably we should have found out about it when the first person was tackled and it was reported to the police. But that's not what happened. William Wragg did not report it to the police. Some MPs have. Some Tory MPs who've been targeted with this have reported it to the police. But the party has basically, you know, covered it up. The other, I mean, it should have been made more public because these same people could be targeting MPs from other parties. No point in trying to keep, you know, it wasn't even good enough. Like, I don't even know if the party leadership warned other Tory MPs as soon as they knew about it, which is the least they should have done. I don't even know they did that. But what if these people were also targeting Labour MPs? No, this should have been made public. It should have been a case of there's this attack. You know, for example, like, you know, when there's like scams going around trying to diddle old people out of their savings or something, the police publicise it, don't they? Oh, there's this scam going around, be aware. Why didn't the Tories do that for the sake of The Tory whip should have done that for all MPs. And of course, by telling all MPs, eventually it will, of course, become public. So, yeah, the fact that they've covered this up as a party makes them look bad. But in terms of like with withdrawal of the whip, if William Wragg genuinely chose to do it himself as a favour to the party, it's basically like saying Rishi Sunak is so bad at politics, he doesn't recognise that my retaining the whip is bad, so I'll just have to help the party out myself. Or was it other Tory MPs who told him, maybe other Tory MPs were going, this is a bad look on me, you're making it harder for me to win my seat, because it's another Tory sleaze scandal that the leadership is circling the wagons around to protect you. I mean, they got really pissed off. Ultimately, the reason they got rid of Boris Johnson was because he kept doing this very thing. He kept defending the indefensible, damaging the reputation of the party, making it harder for other MPs to retain their seat who'd done nothing wrong in their own minds, and eventually having to U-turn. They were sick of Boris Johnson doing this. That's ultimately why they basically got rid of him. Remember, it wasn't Partygate that got rid of Boris Johnson. They were willing to stick by him with that. It was Chris Pincher, who was the latest in a line of Boris Johnson defending the indefensible. So they said, this is it. He doesn't learn lessons. He's gone. And Sunak was doing the same thing. So did Tory MPs say to William Wragg, you need to resign because Sunak's an idiot? In which case, that makes Sunak and the party look bad, that they had to take matters into their own hands. What I can't believe is that Rishi Sunak has quietly said to William Wragg, look, we're going to completely back you in public, but can you withdraw the whip? Because that's ridiculous. If Rishi Sunak recognised that William Wragg shouldn't have had the party whip, he would have taken it off him. Why didn't he take it off him? This makes him look incredibly weak. The resigning from the select committee, that's fine, that's normal. You sort of, generally speaking, you prefer people to resign than to be sacked in politics. So if you're resigning as a chair of a select committee, or you're resigning as a minister, that is normal. The leader usually says, can you resign? Because, we don't want to do a sacking here. That's normal. Resigning as vice chair of the 1922 committee, that's got nothing to do with Rishi Sunak anyway, because that's for backbenchers. But the whip, that is a matter for the leadership. You shouldn't have people voluntarily resigning the whip. The leader should remove it, and they should remove it fairly quickly. Even if it's cautionary, you don't have to say anyone's done anything wrong. It's just a case of they may have done something wrong. We're going to investigate. In the meantime, we're going to withdraw the whip. A couple of more super chats. Captain Bart Roberts, £5. Thank you very much. Says, morning, Phil. Self-firing Tories. Yes. But, I mean, it's an obvious line for Starmer to take in PMQs next week. An obvious line. He's surely going to use it at some point. It may not be next week, but, I mean, why wait? Puninator, £5, says, I'm starting to think our little PM is a little wishy-washy when it comes to actual leadership. He's got no idea, has he? He's got absolutely no idea. His idea of leadership has been making sure the maids sort the beds out, isn't it? That's his idea of leadership. He has got absolutely no idea. I mean, I will grant you, political leadership is really difficult. Like, leadership in general is a specialised role, you could argue. It's not straightforward. It's easy when everyone is willing to be deferential to you and do exactly what you say. Even then, you can still mess it up, but that's easier. If you've got a few surly types in the team, then leadership becomes more difficult. But for politics, I mean, you have got surly types everywhere. Politics is like herding cats at times. So, yeah, political leadership's really hard. And Sunak just has not got a clue. Absolutely hopeless. Waiting for a cash for questions scandal to surface. Well, it sort of already has, in a way, hasn't it? I mean, Scott Benton was a classic case of that, wasn't it? And also, that was that led by donkeys as well? But there was the sort of more wide-ranging led by donkeys sting with people like Matt Hancock and Kwasi Kwarteng. Those were effectively cash for questions. We didn't call it at the time, but that was effectively a cash for questions scandal. It's a cash for lobbying. But what is lobbying other than asking questions? So we have already got cash for question scandals, just like in the 90s. We're just not calling it. Emma's talking about the Braven was interviewed. She's now saying Rwanda's a waste of time. Now I saw a clip by Max. So I haven't seen her whole interview. I noticed she expressed disappointment that Rwanda had been selling the house. She said, oh, it was all fine when I was Home Secretary. It's like, no, it's not. If the agreement said that these homes were for refugees, then that is a legal agreement, right? And they wouldn't have been able to sell them. So the fact that no one's making a fuss about this, or at least not in government, suggests that Rwanda were perfectly within their rights to sell those homes legally, which means our agreement did not stipulate that they were for refugees. But anyway, what exactly is this whip? Can I explain? So sure. So Parliament cannot, I know a lot of people don't like party politics, but it cannot work without it. You cannot have 650 MPs in Parliament, all completely independent. I know some people like the idea of, oh, because they can stand up for the constituency. No, they can't. If you had 650 independent MPs, they would get nothing done. Because the only way to get any legislation through would be to have 326 of them, say. Obviously, in reality, it's a little bit less because of Sinn Féin not taking their seats. But in theory, 326 of them would all have to agree on every word in that legislation. And then who drives the legislation? You need a government to provide steering. Who would they, you'd then need 326 people, MPs, to agree that this one person should be the Prime Minister and form a government. Well, what if the next week they do something they don't like and all of a sudden they do? Impossible. So you need to coordinate MPs. So you have the party system. The way the party system works is the party machine says, look, we're going to help you get elected. We're going to use our resources, our expertise to help you get elected. You stand under the party banner. And in return, you vote the way we tell you to. That is the covenant. And the whip is the way that this is done. So the whips are a group of MPs of that particular party. Labour have whips. SNP have whips. Tories have whips. So the whips act to tell those MPs two things, basically. First of all, two things in the main. There's various other aspects of discipline as well, but mostly it's when they need to be in Parliament and when there are votes, how they should vote. Because it's the only way to coordinate. And it's called whips. It's just a historical term. They don't... Well, actually, I say they don't physically whip MPs. They may not physically whip MPs, but there are stories of various... they are reported to use physical intimidation at times. The whips are not very nice people. And they often talk about the dark arts. And because some MPs can be a bit rebellious, that they will use intimidation. They will threaten to embarrass them they'll use blackmail themselves. They'll threaten to embarrass them. They'll use physical coercion, which is all highly illegal, of course. Only they seem to get away with it in Parliament. At the same time, the basic nature of the whips, which is enforcing discipline, is absolutely necessary. Otherwise, nothing would get done. Nothing at all. Perhaps he resigned because he felt like he'd let the party down. Perhaps the Conservatives wanted to help him through a difficult time. Well, he had already announced that he was not going to be standing as an MP. It is possible that this is what made him decide that. It's possible he made that decision because he knew that this would come out at some point. Because this has been going on long enough for that to be the case. It is also possible that there is more still to come out. We don't know. We don't know what the police investigation is going to turn up. But I really just think... it says, Phil, the comparison to the rat is mean to the rat. Poor thing looks terrified of the wrongers in front of it. It doesn't look terrified. I really only put the rat there just to emphasize. I wanted a picture of a sewer. And sewers don't always look like sewers unless you've got a rat in them. Not that sewers are full of rats, but It says the whips are not very nice people, so all Tories are whips now. But all whips are not very nice. Because yeah, it is important that MPs vote a particular way, and a lot of MPs, will rebel, and they shouldn't rebel. There are situations when it's valid to rebel. Obviously, if you think your party is urging you to vote for something that's illegal, then yes, you should rebel. If you do have to back your constituency as well. So there will be times where the policy of your party, you see the wisdom in it, you understand why they've got it, but you also know that it's not good for your constituency. Well, you have to stand up for your constituency. So that's a reasonable, and any MP really in that situation should go to the whips and say, look, I can't. And it's in the whip's interest to, they can afford a few, if you've got a strong government, you can afford a few rebels anyway, or abstentions. So you just let them abstain or vote against it anyway. Because you're backing up local, your local needs. But generally speaking, there are lots of MPs who want to be a law unto themselves. And it's like, my attitude to that has always been, in any party, if you do not want to accept the responsibility of the party whip, then stand as an independent, see how far you get. But it's dishonest. It's absolutely dishonest to stand under a party's banner and then not accept the responsibility that goes with it, which is to back the party. So by definition, anyone who tries to claim that a particular politician is honest just because they rebel for a cause that you agree with, if they're rebelling against their own party and it's not because of a specific constituency issue, then they're not honest because they've lied. They've lied to become a candidate. There's agreements, there's formal agreements when you become a candidate for your party that they are breaking. Have the rats been flushed out of the sewer into the Thames? Oh dear, and only if they're unlucky. And someone said there the rats on cocaine. They would be if they're in the Thames, yeah. But there we go. There's so many scandals we're hoping to come into light after Labour getting it's going to cost a fortune. Well, it is going to be interesting because there are already investigations going on. I don't just mean criminal investigation like this. The COVID inquiry, I mean, the media's gone quiet on that, but that's still rumbling on. And when it gets to procurement, and that's next year. So the COVID inquiry is going to be looking at PPE procurement, which is surely the biggest scandal of all, or I would have thought is the biggest scandal of all. And that is definitely after the election. Doesn't matter when the election is. They could hold the election in January 2025. The COVID inquiry will still be investigating PPE procurement after it. And when they ask the government for papers, information, the new government is not going to have a problem with that at all. But then you've also got the investigation into HS2 that Labour are promising. I mean, you can't have investigations on absolutely everything, but yeah, but where there are potentially criminal investigations, they're not, the National Crime Agency and the Met Police are not going to find a government that's telling them not to. I don't think Labour will push these investigations because it will then look political. So they will want to make sure they've got very much their hands off, but they will not be putting pressure on them not to investigate. So it could be quite interesting. Although I think I hold out little hope myself that major criminal charges will be brought before some of these senior Tories. But there we go. Reason to rebel as a party going against its manifesto. Yes, that would also be another reason to rebel. Yes, you're quite right. So there are some reasons to rebel. Yeah, you can absolutely say that. Because the manifesto was part of that covenant. So if it's like the leader themselves is supposed to, comply with the manifesto. So if the leader is telling the whips to tell you to vote a particular way, which is counter to the manifesto, then yeah, that is actually the leader rebelling against their own party rather than that MP. is the way I would see that. So that's a good one as well. But what you don't get to do is to use the party system to get elected and then just behave as if you were an independent. And it doesn't matter that you'll say, oh yeah, but I'm voting mostly in line with my party. It's like, yeah, because you joined that party because you're mostly in alignment with them anyway. That's no big deal. You're supposed to vote with them almost 100% of the time. Very, very few justifiable cases for not. John Bull, 4.99 super chat. Thank you very much. I think they should investigate track and trace too. Well, if the COVID, I don't think Labour, given that the COVID inquiry is fairly wide ranging, I'm not. Again, it will look political if Labour, and also just string it out anyway. Like the COVID inquiry is already going on for really long time anyway. Given that we are, we could do with I mean, I know we're getting interim reports. When Labour come in, they could do with being able to implement a proper pandemic response plan. At the very least, they should be setting back up the pandemic response unit, which was never really properly resourced in the first place, but Boris Johnson shut down completely just before we were hit by a major global pandemic. And that has never, I can't, it's absolutely baffling to me that the media are not making anything of this, that we still don't have it. Like you would think after being hit, Boris Johnson closes down our pandemic response unit, which would have been bloody useful. Then we get hit by a pandemic. You would think at the very least you go, oh, that was a bit silly. Let's start it up again. We've never started it up again. So, when the Labour come in, there's lots of things they need to do in terms of sorting healthcare out, sorting everything out. But surely what Labour cannot afford to do is for us to be hit by another pandemic in a couple of years' time and for them to say, oh, sorry, we were waiting for the inquiry to finish before we could do anything. That would look ridiculous. Because actually, the Tories, somehow, and they never should have done, the Tories have come away from the pandemic with credit at the moment. If you look at polling on various issues, when I talk about how Labour are ahead on basically every issue, every policy area, and they are, but if you talk about that's in terms of the normal policy areas, the ones that are relevant now. But if you talk about past ones, the Tories still have a lead over Labour in terms of pandemic response. In other words, most of the public would still trust the Conservatives over Labour to deal with the next pandemic. Is the only conclusion you could come to with the polling, which is mad. So Labour cannot afford for a pandemic to hit and be unprepared. Gary saying, I thought the Tories would be in for 2 terms. So from 2019, they did as well. I thought they would as well, if I'm honest. It was such a beating. Because the way you look at it is where Labour found themselves in. In order to get anything like a sustainable majority, they would have needed to win an extra 140 seats. And you think to yourself, look, the money required and the resources required to target like 80 seats, that's usually Labour's limit. About 80 to 100 seats, because the more seats you have to try and target, the thinner you're spreading your resources. So it seemed virtually impossible. However, as it happens, Labour have been incredibly efficient with targeting voters, incredibly efficient, to the point where, yes, they are prepared to lose votes in their safe areas in order to make sure they gain them in others. And also the fact that the Tories have, entirely as a result of Brexit, really, they have appointed the most unsuitable leaders. And it's not like they've got anyone more suitable. I mean, Boris Johnson, yes, he won in 2019, but he won it based on lies. The lies were always going to be exposed. And I said, even in 2019, when I thought the Conservatives would probably win the next election as well, even then I was still saying, but they will have to get rid of Boris Johnson. I knew they would have to get rid of Boris Johnson. I didn't know the Partygate would happen. I did know that scandals would happen. I knew there'd be lots of scandals. And I also knew that he would not be able to deliver on his promises. So I knew that the Tories would have to get rid of Johnson. Once he'd delivered the Brexit, he was of no further use to them. They'd have to get rid of him and basically say, oh, yeah, sorry about that, but Johnson was... Then they'd have to blame him and then try and get the next one back. But the fact that they... What I didn't realise at the time was that they would have absolutely nobody to replace him with. You know, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak's utterly useless. But think about who they've got waiting in the wings. Penny Mordaunt, she's no good. And she's probably the best of them. James Cleverly, no good. He's weak as well. Kemi Badenoch, she's useless and arrogant. She arguably is the same as Rishi Sunak in that she doesn't understand politics. She's incredibly arrogant. She doesn't like being... So she won't take advice. Because that's one thing that's coming out of these reports. If you believe them, I'm quite sceptical at the moment of various unsubstantiated discussions with like people around Sunak. But one of the things that's coming, what the Times was reporting at the weekend, is people around Sunak a bit... Because it's like Sunak keeps doubting himself because he can't understand why the polls are as they are. I could explain it to him in an afternoon. But he doesn't understand. So he's doubting himself. He knows that what he's doing is not working. And so he doesn't know what to do. But they're also saying, but he won't take advice either. And that's how I see Kemi Badenoch. She doesn't know what she's doing. She's politically inept. But she's also incredibly arrogant. In fact, if anything, she's worse than Sunak. Suella Braverman is totally off her trolley. She's like Liz Truss. You're just getting Liz Truss again, right? You know, who else is there? Priti Patel? She's incompetent as well. Not as incompetent as Suella Braverman. It's quite incredible to me that we had Priti Patel as Home Secretary. And I never would have seen this coming. Couldn't believe that we've actually managed to find a Home Secretary that was even worse than her. You know, they haven't got anyone. How long is it going to take before they get someone suitable? But there we go. Is Labour keeping Rayner out the limelight? No, why would they? Like, I know Guido Fawkes keeps saying, oh, it's been so many days since Angela Rayner did a media appearance. It's like, yeah, that's quite normal. It's loads. You could point to any number of cabinet ministers who haven't done a media appearance for like weeks. It's like, yeah. You know, if Labour are not hiding Rayner, they don't need to. If, for example, Rishi Sunak ran away and decided to go to Ukraine for a Wednesday, Angela Rayner will be doing PMQs. Prunehead say, Phil, Labour can't take all the credit for their predicted majority. Liz Truss probably did way more than Starmer did for the Labour cause. They won't be able to take all the credit, certainly. There will be a lot of things that contribute to the general election result. And part of it will be the Conservatives failing. Because ultimately, actually, voters sort of pick, it's kind of better the devil you know. So if the government are doing all right in their mind, even if the opposition promise loads better, they'll still stick with the government because it's like, well, they're the unknown quantity. So you always need the government to fail, but the government's been failing for a long time. The government never succeeded. This Tory government never succeeded. If you think 2015, which was the other time they won a majority, it's like they didn't win a majority because David Cameron won a load more votes or anything like that. They won because the Lib Dem vote collapsed, and the Tories were in second place in those seats. So the Tories just inherited a Lib Dem vote collapse in 2015. Then they lost that majority again in 2017 as people voted tactically against the Tory Brexit. Didn't quite work. Then in 2019 won a majority again, but that's because Labour completely abandoned every sense of electoral strategy. So again, I mean, you know, remember, the Conservatives did not win. Boris Johnson did not win many more votes than Theresa May 2 years earlier. And yet he got a huge majority. Why? Because the Labour vote collapsed. You know, so 2015, so the Tories, you know, they've only had a majority, not because they won a majority, but because the another party collapsed. In 2010, they couldn't get a majority, even after a huge recession, where they successfully managed to blame Labour, but they still couldn't win a majority. 2015, they got a majority because the Lib Dem vote collapsed. 2017, they lost the majority again. 2019, they won a majority because the Labour vote collapsed. But there is a sense in which, yes, you need the government to be failing, but I would say the government's been failing ever since it came to power. You know, none of its policies have been popular. It's just that up until now, the opposition did not present itself to the people as a credible alternative. Now it is doing. So you have to have both of those elements. And then there's other things as well. There's non-partisan. You know, there's like Stop the Tories, Stop Vote. So there's tactical voting campaigns going on as well. So there's lots of other campaigns that are also trying to get people to sort of vote against the Tories, which has got nothing to do with either Labour or the Conservatives. So there have been lots of people that are responsible for the general election result. But anyway, we've run out of time. There we go. Thanks very much for coming on, everyone. I'll be back on again tomorrow morning. And then I think it'll be Graham again, a lazy bastard. Have a good day. Don't forget to click the like button and subscribe to the channel. And until next time, I'll see you later.